everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Alan East. I work with the Desperado LGBTQ plus film festival here in Phoenix, Arizona. And we're excited to talk to Regan Latimer. Her film, Bulletproof, A Lesbian's Guide to Surviving the Plot, is part of our program this year. And our film festival is coming up January 24th. 25th and 26th. So if you are in town, if you're in Arizona, please come by, watch her film. It's amazing. It's so great. And it really touches on a lot of things that we've all probably lived through. So, and also Coral Snowdeal is going to be moderating today, and I want to introduce her. Coral is part of our community. She's also part of the entertainment industry on the convention appearance side, and she's worked with many actors who play LGBTQ plus characters, as well as a few writers, showrunners, and on these notable shows that we're going to talk about today, like Winona Earp, Batwoman, Lost Girl, and Xena Warrior Princess. So she's got a lot of history with this topic, and I think it'll all come up in today's conversation. So, all right, Coral, go ahead.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for inviting me
Yeah.
to moderate this. And Regan, what a wonderful project you did. It was charming in the ways it needed to be for such a tragic history or herstory of ours. And it was extremely educational for me personally, with the psychology side for connecting fictional characters to our emotions and the history of what's been happening to LGBTQ characters in media and TV. Before we get into your film that we're going to talk about, let's talk a little bit about you. What got you into filmmaking?
Oh, wow. I've always been interested in filmmaking. I can remember even as a kid playing around with like a Betacam, like a just old fashioned or VHS camera, and just filming stuff and just loving it. So really it went from there. And then I went to school for actually broadcast television. And then when I graduated from that, it was at the dawn of video on the internet. And so decided to do a digital series with lesbianic characters, of course.
And what's that series?
That was BJ Fletcher, Private Eye. Yeah, and have done some short films, and I run my own video production company now, where the bread and butter is more like corporate promotional stuff, but I do get to do the creative stuff as well, like this film.
Wonderful. And can you take us a little bit about? We'll get into more of the film, but what is the process that you had to do to make this film, to get it made?
Yeah, that was if I had known back when I started what the process would ended up being, I might have been a bit discouraged about doing so, because it really was quite in depth. It was having to, first nail down what the idea that I wanted to focus on was. And that started from literally watching a TV show in that spring of 2016. I was watching The Walking Dead, and they killed off Merritt Weaver's character. Can't remember her name right now, with an arrow through the eye, which for me, I was sitting on the couch and I'm like, oh, that's it. I'm a filmmaker. I can do something about this. So that's where the idea started. And then it was really figuring out, honing in on exactly what I wanted that idea to be, applying for funding. I applied for Arts Council grants, which is how this film ended up getting made. And then getting a producer on board who had a lot of connections with showrunners and writers, which set up our first interviews, and then we were just rolling after that.
Wonderful. Can you give us a little summary about Bulletproof, A Lesbian's Guide to Surviving the Plot?
So Bulletproof essentially looks at queer representation on television, very much through the lens of my own experience in being a lesbian. It largely focuses on lesbian shows. And there were already other projects out there that do talk about more gay issues and trans issues in representation. So I also just needed to narrow the focus. When I started, I realized that it was actually quite a huge topic. So it helped to narrow the focus on just doing it through my own experience and the experience of those that I interviewed in the film, what shows, were important for them, what characters were important for them. So essentially we look at representation, queer representation in television, and how that representation not only affects the queer community and how we see ourselves and view ourselves, but also the wider community's view of us and how limited that can be when the representation is very limited. So that's in a nutshell what it's about. Yeah.
Wonderful. I grew up in watching your documentary. I grew up in the time where you saw strong women and you were trying to identify with that, but there was something more that you wanted to see, or as we spoke earlier in your mind, you kind of wanted to create more. And then when they did have those characters, you knew you were only watching for a very short time because there would be some tragedy that would happen. In 2016, it seemed to come to a head. So can you talk a little bit about that wave that happened in 2016?
Oh, it was, I think, fair to say, a massacre of queer characters in a very short period of time. And what I think what was possibly so hurtful about it was because we were so excited that at that point there were so many. I mean, in the overall grand scheme of things, it wasn't a huge number, but compared to what we had, it was quite a lot. And then in that spring, it was like show after show, week after week, they were being killed off for their various reasons. I don't think there was any larger conspiracy involved. It was just that's the way shows ran.
Right.
And yeah, it really created for the first time a huge backlash. I think that generation of viewers specifically weren't going to take it anymore, as opposed to a slightly older generation like mine that's like, oh, it happened again.
Right.
Yeah.
It happened again, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think, how much do you think that social media of the time played into that wave, that wave of change, and that wave for you to go, I need to make a change with this documentary?
Yeah, it was huge. Without social media, I don't think that wave would have happened at all. It was a great way for the fans, and not just from, I mean, certainly from a particular show, for them to connect, but also fans of all kinds of shows to come together and actually create strength in their voice together. So social media, I think without social media, that wave wouldn't have happened at all.
Right,
as much as I'd like to think everyone would have sat down and written a strongly worded letter and mailed it off, it would have happened. So yeah, social media was the driving force behind that.
Certainly. And it seemed to me that not only the group watching and their reactions, but also their ability to get into the chat rooms. And sometimes those chat rooms have 2,000-3,000 people in them, where they have sub communities of those chat rooms, and just decided to do something about it from there. To me, that was one of the largest modes of turnaround, that they were able to use that social media.
For sure. It was community. It was a way for all these people to connect, talk about it, realize they're not alone in what they're feeling about it, and organize. And they did some amazing things.
Yeah, raise some money.
Raise some money. They, did billboards to save shows. Like, yeah, it was really all about being able to come together in that way, because these people are all over the world. So without social media, that would not have happened.
Wonderful. And so jumping off of that onto another type of social media with the science behind psychology media. How did you find psychology media, and what did you learn from those folks that you spoke to?
So that was actually my favorite part of making this film, because that was the area that I originally didn't know anything about. Like, I certainly had experienced all the dead characters and everything that comes with that. But, there was always this feeling of, especially, for me, getting attached to a character and then them dying off and being so affected by it, and people around me being like, it's just a TV character. Aren't you overreacting? And so discovering media psychology and talking to Dr. Aidan Hirschfield, who he's so wonderful. He's so amazing. And he is like a fan like us. So he had that experience too, which is partly what, drew him to media psychology. And so that for me was learning about a whole new area that I had known nothing about, and which I also found incredibly validating in the science behind why I'm feeling this way. And no, I am not a weirdo. So yeah, that was great. He was awesome.
Yeah, that to me, that was, I've used that word too, very validating of
Mhm.
that connection and that identity. And
Mhm.
it's a fictional character. Your documentary helped validate that for me. And I know that this new information, I've spoken to a lot of my friends about this information. It's helped
Mhm.
validating for them too.
Great, great. And
So,
actually it's pretty new as a area of psychology. I mean, of course it's new because it's media, and the way it's evolved is also new. And this is kind of an area of psychology that's been developed to address it. Um, but yeah, it was incredibly validating, and just great to hear that it's like, oh, okay, no, it does actually affect your brain and your emotional connections. And there is a reason for that. You're not just overreacting or dramatic or whatever. Yeah. So that was great.
and the facts are that it's normal, which is,
It's totally normal. Straight people have the same, the same connections with their straight characters.
Hallmark movies. So that's why
Yeah,
the
but it
movies are
just
so
seems,
popular.
I feel like it was always a little more okay for straight people, maybe because there was so many of them and would all get excited about these characters. But it's like when we get excited about a character, it's like, oh, you're overreacting, it's too much, you're too being dramatic. So yeah, this was a great way to understand that no, it's a-okay.
It is a-okay.
Yeah.
And how did you find these different people to interview? How did you find Dr. Aiden? How did you find Gail Chris, the psychotherapist?
Oh, Sarah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Sarah.
Yeah.
Gilchrist.
Yes,
Good
Sarah
choice.
Gilchrist, who is
Yeah.
wonderful as well. And also, the great thing about Sarah was also fan like us. She has the same experiences, so can really, really speak to that. Aiden, I found through first discovering media psychology when I first started the film. I'm like, there's got to be more to it. There's got to be some kind of science. But I'm a filmmaker. I'm not big on science. So I basically Googled to find out if there was any part of psychology that was addressing this, found that, and then found Aiden through a book that was specifically about uh, media psychology characters on TV, and he had done one of the chapters. And so I reached out to him, and he was more than happy to talk about it, which was great because he's so knowledgeable. We literally had like a 3-hour interview. It was very hard to select the bits that ended up being in the film, but so wonderful, and as I said, validating. And yeah, Sarah is great because she could speak more, like Aiden spoke a lot to the science aspect, and Sarah spoke to the emotional aspect, and not only the emotional aspect of these characters, but how that plays into that which you're going through in your life anyway, and why it is so significant. Yeah, they were incredible. Those were two of my favorite interviews.
Yes, it was a very eye-opening, and as you said, validating part
Yeah.
of your documentary. It was wonderful.
Okay.
When you decided that you needed to get different aspects of the interviewers, the different categories, celebrities, science and whatnot, how did you go about getting your celebrity interviews?
Something about the celebrity interviews, I didn't want too many of them because I often feel as a society, especially in documentary now, that we give celebrities a lot of weight in what their opinion is, but I'm not sure that it's any more important than a fan's opinion, on these topic and this subject. So I kind of wanted to keep that smaller. So I looked at the people, I had like a wish list of people, and I got several of them. Kat Burrell being one of them, who was, fantastic, but she was able to not just speak to having played a queer character, but also being able to speak to the experience of the fan reaction to her character being at Klexicon in a room full of screaming fans, and what that is like, and her experience with getting letters and stuff like that. And Ali Liebert was the same, from her role on Bomb Girls. And Charlotte, who is so lovely and so funny. It was like the funniest interview, but when I was editing the doc and had to, cut down for time, I didn't get to include as much as I wanted to. But their perspectives were great because they brought something other than just having played a queer character, which I think was really important, and being able to speak to the community that they have now gotten to know and become a part of.
Right. And it seemed like to them was a discovery they weren't aware of.
For all of them, like Charlotte, especially, I asked her, I'm like, did you know about this problem before I called you? And she's like, no, not really, because it's, that's not their world necessarily. And I think for Kat Burrell, she did say, the showrunner of Winona, or did mention to her and Dom that there would probably be some reaction from the community, but they had no idea it was going to be that huge.
It sounds like the showrunner probably did know it was going to be that huge.
100% she did. She knew what she was doing. She definitely knew what she was doing, and it was a huge success, and we're all the better for it. So
yeah. And it seems like that showrunner too knew, because it was 2016 when Kat Burrell's character did wear a bulletproof vest. It was one of the only shows to show a positive light.
Yeah, no, she knew what she was doing. She certainly was not going to end that relationship at the end of the first season. Right. The lesbian fan base was a huge part of Winona getting, the additional seasons that they did. But, I just love that, because it was like, yes, you can put your characters in peril and have stakes without it ending poorly. Like, there are options available.
So a good example for the writer's room for everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. A good example. Yeah.
When you were looking at the statistics for the LGBTQ tragedies, it seemed like you were really able to lay out that there is definitely much more heartbreak and disaster than there is a happy ending. Were you shocked by the numbers that you found?
No. No, because that had been my experience of viewing it as well. It was like, even when you were lucky enough to get a happy ending, a lot of the time those happy ending stories weren't overall that long. Like, it was something you would maybe get in a season with a guest star, and you'd get that happy ending, like, oh great, but then it's over and the story doesn't continue. It seemed like the unhappy endings came when you got more stories. So it was like, trying to take the good with the bad, and ultimately it ending the way you knew it was always going to end. And then it did. Yeah. So I was not terribly surprised, but I was so happy that Heather Hogan at Autostraddle had done all that research on the actual outcomes. Because yes, you do have GLAAD doing their Where We Are on TV report, but that's literally just numbers and statistics. It doesn't, drill down on actual story outcomes for these characters. And it's kind of like, looking back, I was like, I think that I tried to twist that unhappy ending into a sort of happy ending, maybe. But looking at it, it's like, oh yeah, no, it is dire. Yeah. Then there needed to be change. So
were you surprised that you weren't able to find much statistics on gay men's storylines? I mean, we know what they are, but
yeah, we know what they are. And no, I'm not surprised, because the lesbianic community are the type of people who would spend the time to do that kind of research and amount of work. I know that was a huge amount of work to do that. And I do find that in terms of fan level, girls, especially female identifying, especially, are more like this level of fan, whereas gay men aren't that, like, I see Alan nodding, which makes me feel good about that. Yeah, they're not as, I mean, similar in the straight world as well. You have the, like the Swifties. And yes, I know that there's men involved with the Swifties, but it's like girls are just like gung ho for fan stuff. So I think it's too bad that research doesn't exist for gay and for trans as well. But it does not surprise me.
No.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And it does seem, as your documentary lays out, it does seem that for gay men, they seem to be represented more in the very, very distant past as the flamboyant waiter. They were sort of a comic relief. The tailor, the person that's at the front desk of a hotel that's going to give you a hard time. And there were many more gay characters back then than lesbian characters.
I think because that was, yeah, I agree. And I think that was because they were less threatening.
And you could use them as a
not that lesbians are threatening, but yeah, the straight audiences found them funny. They were comical, right? Like it wasn't threatening in any way.
Right. And it was comic relief, and that seemed to change to them dying from some sort of a disease. They also died tragically, but it seemed like it was some sort of disease. And then women visibility, lesbian visibility came up because it seemed to be more sweeps week sensation for the major demographic that watches television, which is young men between 18 and 25. And that's titillating.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then it goes away. It was just that one episode, and it's done now. We did that, represent. Moving on. So, and even once we got more established gay characters, were still very much the stereotype, unfortunately.
Right.
But luckily I feel we've largely moved away from that. I'm just hoping that we continue on in that direction.
What were some of the greatest successes you think that came out of your process, came out of the process of making your documentary?
Like for me personally, or for the film itself?
Yes, both.
I love getting to meet everyone that I met. It certainly expanded my knowledge on this subject. Going into it, I'll admit it, I was cocky. I was like, I know all about this. What do I have left to learn? I'm just going to, learn, teach others. But then the more people I talked to and the more experiences I heard about, it's a very nuanced subject. It's not very black and white. So, I loved everyone I met, especially Aiden, getting to learn about that whole new area for me of the science aspect to it, but also getting to talk to the fans and, understanding what it means to them. And even, like talking to Megan Townsend at GLAAD, what I loved hearing from her most was, she has all the great statistics from GLAAD and whatnot, but what was most interesting to me was her talking about her experience growing up and what shows she liked to watch and what impact they had on her. That was the most interesting part, was no matter who I interviewed, I asked everyone that question, like, who were the characters that impacted you most and why? And those answers were some of the most interesting. So that was great. I've forgotten what the question was in terms of.
So for making the documentary, what was some of the greatest successes? What hurdles did you cross that you were like, yes, finally?
The big hurdle was getting it done. It was a long period of time, and getting it done was a huge hurdle, not to mention the pandemic. But at the same time, what was incredibly frustrating at the time actually turned out to be helpful and useful, in that it gave me more time to discover the story for the doc. Because when I started, it was more a topic, not necessarily a story. And the time that I ended up having to work on it allowed me to discover the story and my own, story that ended up being in the doc, which was certainly not a part of my original plan at all. So, what seems like a bad thing, like the pandemic, which, don't get me wrong, was horrible, did end up actually being a positive for the project, in the time it gives you to breathe and look at it and discover things, which you don't always get. Like even our grants had a deadline of a year from when you got the grant. And of course, the following year was the pandemic, but it was like when the deadline was approaching, we were actually we were planning our trips to England and abroad for interviews, and that's when the pandemic hit, and the whole thing had to come to a stop. And that gave me time to, look at where we were at, what we had, what interviews we had, and how I actually wanted to shape the story without just trying to hurry through it and get everything done and get it in by the deadline. So it ended up being quite helpful. That was a success, even though it was really bad for the world.
Well, out of tragedy sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I felt as though you putting yourself into your documentary made it so much more relatable to me.
Right.
I saw somebody who went through the same things I did. And I think that was incredibly clever. And that was a part of the charming piece of it. Very charming piece of it.
Thank you. And I'm so glad it had that effect. Frankly, I still don't want to be in it. Like, I am not a person to be in front of the camera. Originally, it was going to be Lindy's story was going to be the story arc of the doc, and then the pandemic hit and we couldn't film together. So I'm like, well, we got to keep moving forward. I guess I'll be in it. It was fighting tooth and nail. I still don't want to be in it, but I do see the providence in being in it and it being more relatable, because it is very, dear to my heart experience. Like, this was literally my experience. And I do find that that's what people are connecting to. So that's great, but I still don't want to be in it.
Understood.
Yeah.
What were some of the key things that you learned talking to the other half of the industry with the writers, Noel and Javier?
Yeah. That was a bit eye-opening as well. And one of the things that actually came out of one of the reasons I wanted to speak with the industry people was seeing a lot of the blowback on like Twitter and social media towards showrunners and writers, especially. I felt there was a bit of misunderstanding in terms of who holds the power and who you should be angry at. And I felt it would be beneficial to talk to them and really break down how it works, where the power lies, and who you should be writing your strongly worded letters to. I mean, let's focus. Mm-hmm. So that was incredibly interesting. And it's like, for us, we take these things so personally, like these deaths are, or even, doesn't have to be a death. Just like when bad things happen, we take it so personally about these characters. And there is so much other stuff going on with a show. Like, sure, to us, this character is a huge, or these relationships are huge parts of these shows, but there's a whole other show built around that, and a lot of other, things that showrunners and writers have to answer to. So I really felt it was important to break that down. And it was interesting to talk to Javi and Noelle, who, Noelle is gay. So you would think, she would be aware of this stuff, and she totally wasn't. But at least she was in a position to make a change, which was, it was great to see, once people are educated, the changes they make, like Javi, who will never kill off a lesbian character again, blessed, because of the, blowback he got for something that wasn't even really his decision. So yeah, it was important for me to kind of pull the curtain back on how these shows are made, so that we have a bit of a better understanding as to why. Like, especially like shows, the big thing now is shows getting canceled, which sucks, but it's like, there's so many things that go into that decision process. And I can tell you, it's not, they're canceling it because there's this great lesbian relationship, like there's a lot of things that go into those decisions. So yeah.
Do you think the cancellation now is a product of streaming, the budgets and the process of streaming?
100%. I remember when A League of Their Own, the series, came out, and the showrunner of that series and the stars were encouraging everyone to not only watch it, but watch it as soon as it came out, watch all the episodes, binge it, get on social media, get it out there that you love it, like post about it, because that now plays a role. And that was not the case. There was a much greater period of time that it would take between TV and understanding how your show was hitting. But now it's like, immediate. So when they don't see the results right away, it's like, well, we're canceling that. We're not going to put any more money into that. So streaming plays a huge part in that. And streaming is, I mean, broadcast was as well, but very much about money. And if they're not making money on it, or they're not seeing a return on it, they don't care that you love that lesbian couple. I mean, it's great that you did, but you know, bless lesbian fans. Yes, we can be very loud, but in terms of numbers, we're a small portion of their audience. We can all watch it and we can all love it, but that still won't be enough for, you know, the rest of the show. So
Right.
yeah, streaming has really changed a lot of things in the industry. Some good, but a lot not as good, unfortunately. Yeah.
Right. So it does seem like it's gone from 2016 to this very much bury your gaze trope.
Yeah, now it's more like
There's-
cancel your gaze, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was tragedy, it was heartbreak, catastrophe, to now you can't even sort of get an investment. I mean, you do, because you're gonna.
Yeah, that's
Even
right.
if it's 2 seasons.
Yeah.
But now it seems like it's not that cancellation isn't so much the tragedy and the heartbreak, but the bigger piece of the money from streaming.
100%. 100%. So it's like we're victim to the money side of it.
Mhm.
It's like the show could have been great. The characters could have been great. The overall show that those characters were in could have been great. But if it doesn't have the return, they don't care.
Right.
This isn't about our feelings, unfortunately. It's about money, as so many things in this world are.
Right. Right. How can folks see your film?
So right now we are on the festival circuit. You can certainly see it at the Desperado Queer Film Festival, January 25th. We have a festival coming up in Kingston and hopefully other festivals coming up this year. A large part of our festival circuit was last year. We debuted in May and have been going around, which is great. But right now we're in talks that I can't really talk about. But yes, we are in talks to, you know, get it in more of a wider release streaming type situation. So you can keep, you know, an eye on our website and on our Instagram. We'll certainly be updating it there.
Wonderful. Well, folks and viewers, in order to see that positive note, please find where Bulletproof, a lesbian's guide to surviving the plot is being played in different festivals, and keep an eye on the Instagram address, which is
Instagram is bulletproof doc, and our website is bulletproofdoc.ca. We always post all of our news on there.
And if you want to see it at the end of the month, you can go to Desperado Film Festival. Did I say that right, Alan?
You did. Desperado LGBTQ plus film festival. Yeah.
In Phoenix, Arizona. And what's the dates for that again, Alan?
January 24th, 25th, and 26th. 2025, which is just so crazy to me. I know.
But that's why festivals like Desperado are so important, because they do give voice to the indie projects.
Yeah.
And that is very important right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So thank you for having us there.
Yeah, definitely. We're excited to show it. It's one of our Saturday premiere films. It'll be fun to have everybody come and see it. And then they'll all probably be in our lobby talking about all these poor characters got killed off, and all their favorite shows. It'll be fun to hear audience reactions. I bet that was fun for you for sure. So
it was. When we had our premiere in Toronto, it was a sold out house, and it was the first time I'd shown it pretty much to anyone. At that point, like 2 people had seen it. So watching it in a full house and hearing the laughter and like all the reactions were really amazing. So yeah, it's great to see it in a theater. So that's why it's so great to be at festivals like Desperado.
Right. Well, congratulations again. And we're
Thank
excited to screen it. And we hope to see Bulletproof 2 someday.
Yeah.
Bulletproof.
I'll get started on that now, and it should be
all right.
Bulletproof, what's happening now?
A lesbian's guide to what? I don't know.
Just surviving.
Surviving.
It'll just be surviving.
I like that. All right. Well, thank you again so much. And for viewers out there, please check out our website, DesperadoFilmFestival.com. You can get all the information about our upcoming festival at the end of the month again, and we hope to see you there. So And thank you to Paradise Valley Community College for supporting us. 16 years is a long time, and we've done a lot for our community, and we hope to keep on chugging along. So it's great. So
Excellent. Thank you.
thank you so much.